Welcome back. You've all done very well to be back only a little bit late. And now we have our first panel discussion. And the idea of this is to have some introductory comments made by the panelists that are in the programme, and you can see their names here. We'll have some introductory comments, then a little discussion amongst ourselves, but then you will all have the opportunity to make any comments, ask any questions for us to discuss up here. So whilst we're having the initial comments, I'm sure you can all be thinking of something that you'd like to say. So let me first of all invite Leonid to make some comments, give some reaction to some of the themes that we talked about before the break from the perspective of governments and regulators. Leonid, we look forward to your thoughts.
Спасибо.
Thank you very much. I think that the question about the role of the professional organization may appear a little bit even strange, particularly when we think that this question is posed in the country where this event is taking place, where the history of the professional accountancy body numbers many, many years. This is the question which is even strange for a lot of countries that are represented in this hall. For example, in the Russian Federation, the professional audit institutions exist for more than 20 years. And one could think that over the 20 years' time, it would be possible to stop discussing the importance of the role of the professional organization. And nevertheless, we think it only seems to be a strange question. The new reality one needs, in the most important way, to review the role of the professional accountancy and regulatory institutions. If we look at such traditional important functions for our profession, such as to set the professional standards, for example, and now it is outside the limit of the national professional institutions. If we take this function, for example, to set up the ethic rules, we live practically in the world where to this or that extent the general code of ethic is being accepted, and it is going beyond the national level. And also it refers in many cases to the requirement of education, independent professional qualification. Not long ago, from the historical point of view, of course, the function has been dropped out from the number of functions of the professional institution. It's the oversight of the activity of the members of the audit market. It's no longer the function. And under such conditions, it is very important to understand, so what is in the scope of activity of the professional auditing institution. And in this respect, I think it's very interesting and very important to take into account what was discussed before the coffee break. It was the role of in this society, in the business society, how the ICAEW sees its role in this sphere, and how the role of this institute as the regulator has changed during the number of years, and to see how ICAEW sees its own role as the regulator nowadays. It's the supporting the role of the regulator. It's the supporting the level of qualifications and knowledge of its members, because it is through these parameters that the Institute is making its input into the development, business, economy, and of the society. Now I represent the regulators in the Russian Federation from the Ministry of the Finance of the Russian Federation. I think it is this function which should take most of the attention to implement it by the Russian Professional Audit and Accountancy Institution. That's what the Russian self-regulating audit regulations are lacking. And also the professional institutions, professional organizations that exist in the accountancy world in the Russian Federation. We should help our members to continue the high professional and qualification level, to accumulate knowledge, skills, experience that exists in the professional community in order to disseminate this experience, to share this experience with its fellow members and with all those people who are interested in this experience. And this is one of the main functions of the Accountancy and Audit Professional Organization, from my point of view. Thank you.
And you kept perfectly to 5 minutes, so thank you very much for doing that, and you've set an example for others to try and follow. Could I look next to Arman, if you'd like to make some comments from your perspective? What have you reflected on from the discussions before our coffee break?
We talk so much about the coffee break. Have you been discussing something vitally important and which we missed by any chance? I would like, from the point of view of the regulator, to tell you what are our requirements from the regulators, that the professional organizations. We would like them to do everything and to be responsible for everything to begin with. And then when we would like regulators them to do something, they do absolutely everything. That's what we're wishing for. I think everyone is wishing for the same. It is very important to use British experience, because British experience numbers very many years, has immense experience. But we have a problem. We do not have the Privy Council or the Queen or the King who would give us the Royal Charter, who would help us to uphold this, the standards of the organization, the way they should be done. We are the continental countries. We have the norms which are written in our legislation and our law, and that's how it's done. Not long ago, we met the representative from France, and he told us from their own experience, referring to the Constitution. And how does it happen in England? Well, and the representative of France said, as usual in England, nothing exists written down, and everything works very well nevertheless. So what we have to do is to glean a very good experience. The content should be above the form. The content embraces everything: skills, experience, knowledge, everything that you have as treasures of your Institute of Chartered Accountants. And now we have to think, how can we arrange it in the form of the legislation? And that's our difficulty. And I think for all the CIS countries, this is the common problem. I think we can discuss it among ourselves. And we can, going forward together, how to translate this experience into the legislative form. Thank you very much.
Much, Arman. That was excellent. I won't mention the coffee break again, but I will mention again that somebody stuck straight to precisely to 5 minutes. I'm very impressed, and so this establishes a real expectation for Alexandra to live up to as to whether you can do it in 5 minutes or say, well, these guys could have spent 10 minutes, so I've got 15 minutes. I prefer you to say 5 minutes, and then we will have this time for discussion. Alexander.
Thank you, Robert. Дорогие коллеги.
Thank you, dear colleagues. Also, with great interest, I've been listening to the presentation of both regulators, the representative of the Ministry of Finance of Russia and Kazakhstan. In Russia, it's all very interesting. I represent the federal finance. I'm the head of the Federal Finance and Budgetary Oversight Service, and we look for the audit organization, not self-regulated organizations, but the core of the regulatory bodies. And certain measures that applied to the self-regulating organizations, it's a scope of our work, the Ministry of Finance. And I wouldn't even consider what we're doing in this respect. What I'm interested in is the following thing. It is the ethic. Ethics play a vital role in Britain, and how it's been maintained in Great Britain, and it hasn't been maintained by law. I'm convinced that no law can help you to uphold the ethical side. And I wanted to see what is the role of state in this, or rather the lack of role in this. And we notice the following thing. It seems to me that the role of the state is not to regulate something, to control something, although it's part of the management. I think that the state should create conditions for business, and that would be enough so that business communities in future, through the self-regulating structures, would perform the self-regulatory functions and eliminate those members from their membership base who do not want or who cannot uphold these ethical principles. And that's what I think till 2011. I thought that the government should not interfere with this. But in 2011, there was an interesting happening. It was the resolution of the European Parliament, which made the emphasis to increase the role of the state in the activity of the regulatory community. You will see it in the text in this legislation. And one can think, what caused this surge to increase the role, to increase the presence of the state in the sphere of this business? And the answer is very evident. That was the crisis, because everyone thought that the state, the government, should create the conditions and community should work itself. And it was thought that the government stated something, but when the community cannot uphold it, that something like the crisis happens, it starts to blame the government and the state. What happened? I do not even need to illustrate it, because the community then starts to blame the state, and the state institutions could not prevent the crisis. And that is why I think it's very important to find the objective borderline when the state should interfere and when the state should not interfere. There's a very simple example. Yesterday I had a very fruitful day. I had lots of meetings with my colleagues, ICAEW, and we came to very simple conclusions. With all these restrictive approaches that we could use for our services to monitor the auditors, it seems that our actions are less strict than the actions of the ICAEW. Last year, we proposed to remove the registration, which is remove the license of 2 auditing organizations, and also to suspend the question of 5 more organizations. And we checked 115 organizations. That's what we did. But the ICAEW checked 70 auditory organizations, and the result, they removed the license from the 17 organizations and 6 more, understanding that they would not uphold the requirements. They themselves asked to remove their registration. And if you compare the figures, you will see that the government restrictions, which of the service that I represent in Russia, are not as strict as the actions of the appropriate organization, ICAEW, in England, because their measures for control, for monitoring, is far more strict. And what's the conclusion? Very, very useful conclusions. We would like our self-regulating organizations would like to use the ICAEW as the model for action and behavior. And if you will see what were the reasons, what were the causes to revoke the registration and the license in Britain and in Russia, and compare them, you can see that in Russia it was connected with huge abuse. A huge abuse of all the norms, rules and regulations. But over here, it was mainly caused by the abuse of the ethical norms. Here, as I would like to draw your attention, these ethical norms have been formulated, but no one had the measurement of it. But what do you think will happen when there was the quality control of the auditing organization? It was the request to see the electronic database. They saw some discrepancies in the database, but when the next day they started to look at it, they saw that all the databases have been adjusted. We consider it as some type of fraud, but we have to prove it. But according to the British ethics, this is a singular aspect which will cause for the revoke of the license. Another question is re-entry into the self-regulatory organizations. Those bodies, those organizations that had disciplinary actions taken against them. And I would like to draw your attention. If you look at your own practice, you will see a lot of interesting examples yourselves. Very often, organization leaves the organization in order to avoid the external monitoring, and then they return and they're admitted. And I think this is a very complicated very complicated thing. And I think that the ethical code should be applied. I would like to talk about certain things that are not perhaps very pleasant to the ears of our colleagues, but that was the lessons that I learned, and this is my impression. Thank you very much.
To the three panelists, I picked up that you were saying things which were quite radical, quite hard-hitting. And so before I invite input from the audience, I just wonder whether any of you would like to respond to anything which another panelist said. So I don't know, Leonid, you went first. Any reflections having heard Arman and Alexander?
Единственное, на что я...
The only thing that I would like to draw the attention to, and it will be the difference from Arman, I do not want very much that everything is done for the regulators. Of course, part of me wishes me that most of it was done, but not all of it was done. When we're talking for the disciplinary action, for revoking of license, I would like our organization to do it. No, but I said that everything that the regulator wants, the professional organizations, institutions would do everything that the regulators want. May I interrupt you? With your permission, of course, you said that everything went beyond the frameworks of professional organizations concerning the ICAEW, the standards. But who are the representatives of these organizations? The members of these bodies are the same people. They are from the same professional community. They are the questions concerning standards. They are the questions concerning when we talk about convergence with a gap and other standards. For example, we do not always agree with this, but we should somehow influence it, and we should influence it through the serious professional bodies, institutions that have a considerable scientific foundation to talk about it. Talking about taxation, in any case, taxation depends on the financial reporting and on the accountancy. But nevertheless, taxation and the state function, and not only to collect the taxes, but to pursue its own economic goals. And here we're using these methods because the national structures are accepting such standards with which we have to put up. More or less, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. You're always worried, chair a panel, that maybe there won't be any passion and maybe there won't be any real debate. I think that we've had a lot of passion and debate, but now it's your opportunity to join in. And you know the formula. There will be people with microphones ready to go to anyone who puts their hand up to say they have a point they'd like to make, and we'll give you a microphone. So anybody who would like to say anything? It's an opportunity to... you interested? The lady here, Vadim. Oh, sorry.
Большое спасибо.
Thank you very much. It's a bit strange to meet the regulator, our national regulator in London. So obviously, the question is to you, Leonid. So auditing self-regulating institutions been acting in Russia for 3.5 years. Of course, everything should be improved and fine-tuned, and any institution requires to involve the state regulator is a very important link in the chain. You set the style, the strategy of development. And I would like to know how do you see the prospect of interaction with the self-regulating bodies? Are there any changes to expect, and what could we expect in the future? Is it going to develop towards more delegation of coordination and other matters to self-regulating bodies? Thank you. Well, of course, the model of interaction between professional body and the regulator must and will evolve and change depending on the environment in the market and the society as a whole. But I think that at this stage of development of the auditing profession, at least in Russia, it is very important, the most important now is the self-identification of professional bodies in the area for audit, identification of scope of such bodies in the current environment, i.e. what are the main functions and roles of these bodies, especially in Russia, with account in view of the diversity and multitude of such bodies. I think this is the primary question in our view now. Despite the fact that accounting and auditing professional bodies have been in existence in Russia for more than 20 years, but the question of self-identification, identification of functions and roles and missions of such bodies, or at least functions and objectives that are stated, for example, by ICAEW. This matter still hasn't been resolved, but at least auditing professional bodies in Russia, and I think that should be the main focus for their work now. Thank you.
To add anything to that answer?
Well, I've got nothing to add because my professional bodies, they're silent. In Kazakhstan, they don't ask anything. Well, of course, colleagues, if I start to continue, that would take a long time.
Kazakhstan, which maybe means there's a forest of hands, but also we have had a largely Russian and Kazakh discussion so far, so I appeal to others. But Vadim, choose... Oh, you already have a microphone. Excellent. And who are you?
Я в диалог России и Казахстана.
Well, I would like to add a Ukrainian note into the dialogue of Russia and Kazakhstan. Well, the question is actually, my question is to the Russian regulator, Ukrainian Certified Accountant and Auditing Association. I'm vice chairman of the Eurasian Council there. My question is to Alexander Smirnov. As I understand, one of your functions is an external quality assurance control of the auditing companies. From your presentation, I heard that self-regulating bodies perform similar functions. So there's a clear overlapped duplication of functions. Why is that? Is it because of a shortage of trust, confidence in self-regulating bodies, or is it just you want to double check and want to make sure and be confident in what firms do? Well, there's no secret here. Moreover, I can say that, I can say that there's no secret here. And I can see an analogy here with what was said before the coffee break. Sorry, I apologize about mentioning coffee break again. What was said that the regulator, UK regulator, has a right and executes its right to audit and inspect both self-regulating bodies and companies. When is it needed? In our legislation, it is said that we need to inspect, check bodies, organizations that carry out audit of publicly listed companies, and also those who perform audit of companies where there are at least 5% of state ownership. The objective is clear here. It's a direct trust assurance. It's a direct means of development of confidence. The state can withdraw from this area only when it can be sure that auditing bodies, professional community can perform this regulation itself sufficiently. Unfortunately, in our case, it is not so at the moment. I mention it, but still I should say that there's a clear analogy. The UK regulator remedies are very similar to what is the remedy of a Russian regulator. Thank you.
Если позволите, я два слова.
If I may, just I'll add a couple of words here. Well, apart from the fact that it is a common and popular model, I mean, independent regulator of certain auditing bodies. I'm referring to Russian experience here. We also have certain mistrust. Well, I can give you some statistics over the last year. Self-regulating bodies in Russia checked. 974 auditing firms, auditing organizations, and with respect to this 974 bodies, self-regulating bodies introduced measures against only just over 40 organizations, entities. The independent auditor checked 115 auditing entities and applied measures with respect to 97 auditing entities. I don't want to doubt the quality of work of self-regulating bodies. Well, maybe self-regulating bodies checking, inspecting very ideal, perfect auditing entities. Maybe everything was really was absolutely fine there, while the federal regulator selecting only the poor performing ones. Well, I cannot rule this out, of course, but something inside me objects, doesn't let me come to this conclusion. And also, I should say that last year, 2012, was the first year when the Rosfinadzor, the Russian financial regulator, started working. And I should say that it boosted the level of quality control in self-regulated bodies. I'm sure self-regulating bodies can assess it themselves, but from the point of view of the regulator, we can see that there is a certain progress in this area.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much. Just continuing the Ukrainian questions. Dmitry Alexeyin, Vice President of Professional Audit and Accounting Association in Ukraine. I'll continue the subject of mistrust, lack of confidence. For example, in our country, anti-corruption legislation doesn't apply to professional bodies, probably in other countries as well. So as regulators, what do you think? Should anti-bribery, anti-corruption legislations apply to professional bodies? And if no, how this area, to what extent this area should be regulated by the state? I'm talking about receiving benefits for quality control, for audit, and so on. So how important is it to regulate this area? Well, let me answer this. Well, you see, all our questions are about how we punish, what for. Will be punishing auditors, professionals. Now let's punish the management of professional bodies. Well, what is corruption, after all? Corruption is, from the Kazakhstan law point of view, is to do with public area, public officials. So there are state-owned companies, maybe someone, non-governmental companies, non-state companies, no public sector. If someone gets illegally, it's not corruption. It's an unlawful benefit. That's something different. But if we transferred part of the function that used to be the remit of the state, but the state agreed to delegate it. We understand, from the legal point of view, it's not corruption because it's nothing to do with the government, with the public sector. There's obviously ethics, unlawful benefits, and so on, but it's not corruption. That's my personal opinion from the government point of view. If you mean corruption in the wider sense, tips you give to the waiter is also, in a way, a bribe to stop the waiter spitting into dish.
That's interesting.
Ну, я тоже хотел добавить, значит, сразу по двум вопросам.
I would like to add here, dear colleagues, regarding trust and mistrust. You know, well, the government is a machine, is a mechanism. If you take Engels, for example, the state is the coercive institution. That's the nature of the government and the state. So, of course, we apply standards and rely on standards that exist. But also it was said here that if we compare audits, inspections carried out by us and by self-regulated bodies, of course we are using risk-based approach. 100%, I don't know what they do in self-regulating bodies. How do they inspect or audit, whether they expect only the good ones or not? I'm sure it's not true. But now regarding corruption, well, what is corruption? What is not corruption? It's a good subject. In self-regulating bodies, not to audit or check a certain circle of organizations. Is it corruption or not? Just think about this. Until this is sorted out, the state must do this. And the directive only confirms my opinion here. Even the EU is concerned about this. Even if the body is a self-regulating body and functions well otherwise, but someone is outside their supervision and their control. Why? It's obviously shouldn't be so in an organization that cares about its reputation. If the organization cannot do it itself, the state should take over.
Panel, but I'll defer to where's. Oh, there it is. Thank you very much.
Слышно, нет? Слышно?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Dolatenko, Institute of Professional Auditors. Since we are in the UK, and let's open and read. Here are the founders of our profession. They're all from here, basically. So the question is, how many years it took for English institutions to set up such an excellent quality assurance control that we are learning from now? What I mean is that auditing profession in Russia is about 15 to 20 years old, according to different estimates. So my question is, how many years it took to set up a proper quality assurance system?
I think it's a useful question to ask, because I was just going to myself reflect that maybe there was a lot of passion and impatience evident in the discussion about why can't everything be trusted. But it does, I think, take a long time. I would also go back to what Alexander said about, as soon as you seem to have a settled regime, then a crisis happens, and then things are thrown into turmoil. And I would just accept that as the way things are. Our profession actually develops through learning from bad experience, and you never know what crises you've prevented by the reforms you've made, but there will always be a next crisis, another problem. That will always happen. And I think that the approach that we would always try and adopt is one of a constructive learning. In a way, it's for historians to decide who was to blame. But actually, when there is a crisis and a loss of confidence, everyone has to get together to decide how to rebuild trust and confidence. Because if there's a loss of trust and confidence, we've all failed. The system has failed, and the extent to which individual organisations were responsible is a slightly theoretical one. So I just think that the way we would learn to approach these problems that you see is, what's the common solution? Let's not first of all deny there are problems, but then how do we come up with some shared solutions? This is an approach that ICAEW has adopted in response to the financial crisis. We have spent over a century developing our reporting and auditing of banks. The Institute was actually founded in the wake of the collapse of the Bank of Glasgow. And you could say, so 5 years ago, 2 of your largest banks collapsed and needed to be rescued by the state. What have you learnt? Well, we always need to keep learning new lessons. And our profession actually develops through responding to these crises, and rather than just finding out who is to blame, and if people need to go to prison, people need to be punished, that's fine, but what are we going to do to restore confidence? And I think that might lead me to ask a question of all the panelists who in various ways have talked about the challenges that they see with particularly the quality of auditing. What do you think can best be done by the organisations you represent, plus the SROs and the audit firms, audit companies themselves, to move forward? If I'm allowed to ask you a question.
Я думаю, что если бы мы могли
I think that if we could answer this question, then it would be the last such forum on this topic, because then we would find the philosopher's stone, which would bring happiness to the auditing profession. I think that one of the important steps that would help a proper functioning of the auditing profession, and that would help auditing to perform its role within the market economy. It's very important for every entity, institution that exists in this auditing sector would be clear about its mission and clearly performed its functions. In our opinion, this is one of the problems in the current auditing market in Russia, for example. Until each entity, I mean the government, the professional bodies, and business community, and auditors themselves, until they each of them understands the purpose, its roles and functions. The result would be like in the famous Russian Krylov's fable about swan, crawfish, and pike pulling the cart in different directions. Well, I can say that Kazakhstan wasn't affected by the financial crisis as much, because we didn't have serious collapses. Yes, we had some problems, and some companies went bust. Some entities couldn't pay for their securities, and obviously everyone's trying to blame the auditors as usually. But on the other hand, in Kazakhstan, I don't know about Russia. In Kazakhstan, big four companies usually audit large entities. And they've got a long history. They've, as I understand, they even contributed in founding your Institute of Chartered Accountants. I'm not concerned about them. I'm more concerned about small accounting firms which doesn't have advanced technologies. They don't have access to training. They don't have a brand to capitalize. And actually, after the crisis, it's just I'm an auditor myself. I used to have a small local company, slow local firm. And Big Four eventually squeezed me out of the market, squeezed me into the civil service, and that's where I'm going to fight them. Well, the fact is, they are taking jobs that are not of interest for them in the past. That's how the crisis worked in Kazakhstan. The crisis shrunk the market, and the market was even more taken over by the Big Four. And from this perspective, what concerns me as a regulator is how small firms are going to survive in this environment. And here, a useful lesson that we learned from the presentations today is that we learned about the wide range of services provided by the members of ICAEW. Well, traditionally, for example, smaller firms are better in tax area. They know better than in big four. They know this area more than big four, because big four usually would just make provisions about limiting their liability. Banking area, that's a problematic area. I would like to say a few words here as well. We've got bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is an important area. We've got an institution of insolvency professionals. Valuation business. This business is regulated somehow, but the valuation sector is not as developed as auditing and accounting, so it's very unconsolidated and chaotic. So if we can somehow consolidate this area, that would help local smaller firms to survive, and that's what my concerns are.
Alexander speaks that it's worth mentioning that the most of the firms registered with the Institute are not actually audit firms, but they are still subject to quality assurance inspections by the Institute to try and make sure that the services that they are providing to the public, whether in tax, accounting, business advice, advice with financing, are being delivered to a high quality. And I think that's a point that I thank Alman for raising, that it's not just about audit. There are many services that public practice firms provide to the business community where the public has a right to expect quality, but they don't necessarily expect the government to directly inspect that. And I think it's very important that the quality assurance that exists commands public confidence, and that means there needs to be confidence in, I might call them SROs, but the professional bodies that are going to supervise the provision of these services. Alexander.
Спасибо.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Robert. I also wanted to say that my recipe is very timely and is very short for all the CIS countries. The problem is an easy one. 130 years, the professional body in England and Wales was consolidating and building its reputation. It's very difficult to gain reputation, and the Big Four also were gaining reputation based on very high standards. And I think the very main recipe which we can get out of today's event is that our professional bodies, accountants and auditors should preserve and maintain their professional reputation. And the same applies to the state of the colleagues who monitor us, who check us. Because all those who are doing the checks have the qualification certificate of the auditor. We say that there is the inclusive profession, but what would be his reputation as the controller? He had so many mistakes, and then he comes into the profession. So that's why I say reputation is the most important thing.
It's nearly time, but we can take one final question. But if you could be quite brief.
Oh, thanks. Just a question too, because thanks for your comments. And one question is, I was shocked to hear that there is 1,000 more audit firms in Russia. I worked in Russia in Big Four, and was because as an audit professional, I don't understand how could be there more than 30, 40 audit firms because auditing needs a system, it needs a quality, it's international auditing standards, and that more than 1,000 firms can, even 100 firms in Russia can provide such kind of service. I was shocked. So there is something wrong. I don't know, maybe in England you can say how many auditing firms are there. And there is something that in all former Soviet countries, we hear that there's a differentiation between accounting, tax consulting, and auditing. And this is something that we hear again that the audit firm is not the tax consultant. Many companies in our countries, they need tax consulting or accounting consulting. It doesn't mean that they should go to audit firms and expect that the audit firm will provide this. This is even the contrary to independence. Okay. So this is something, and also another that I always not good to hear that there is 150 years for England association to come to this. It doesn't mean that we need another 150 years.
Okay,
thank you. The world changes, the times goes very rapidly, the solutions are there, we can take it and go much faster than 150 years to get something. Thanks.
Thank you for those comments. I'll just make two observations, and then we can stop talking about coffee break and go to lunch. First of all, there are still over 4,000 firms authorised to perform audits in the UK. Most of them are under the quality assurance regime of ICAEW, with the regulator, the external regulator, looking after just the top 20 or so. So it is possible, with a lot of hard work, to still have small firms doing audits of small businesses. On your second point, I agree it would be not very helpful to say that we just have to come back in 2140, since none of us will be alive in 2140 to see how things have worked out. I think what we can say, though, is that there's a lot of things that can be picked up from others' experience, but we should also expect the learning process to just continue, because the fact is that we've never stopped changing in our 130 years. We're just all still learning. So I would say that rather than think that in 100 years' time all the bodies in this meeting will have reached the end point, they'll be just like us in 100 years' time. They'll still be having to adapt and respond to crises, but maybe the lesson of evolution is that the people who survive are those not who are the fittest, but those who are the most adaptable. And I think that all the bodies here will have to keep adapting. It's not just a question of waiting 100 years, because none of us will be around in 100 years if we don't keep adapting. So, on that note, I'd like to thank our panelists. Thank you all for your questions. I appreciate the liveliness of the discussion, and you can now go and have lunch. And I promise that when we come back from lunch, I'll talk about what we talked about before lunch, just like I talked about the coffee break. So a big round of applause for our panelists and yourselves. Thank you.